Hey guys, welcome back. Behavior Strategies for Class here. And this is our monthly chat with Andrew Smith, our local, not local, but our resident. How about that? School counselor, behavior tutor extraordinaire. So welcome back, Andrew.
Thanks. Happy to be any sort of resident somewhere. At
Oh,
least
good.
that's what my taxes say, right?
Right. So today we're going to be talking about some efficient training for staff regarding student behaviors. Now, we know some of this is not always handed to you guys. Districts do all kinds of training, or maybe none at all, regarding specifically student behavior. So, we're going to highlight some items that we think would be great training for you guys to get. And of course, there's going to be online information, there's going to be YouTube, there's going to be lots of different websites, but hopefully, we will give you some strategies you can use and some websites to go to help equip you better for your students who have that challenging behaviors. So, Andrew, let's start off with one type of training that will be good for staff regarding student behavior.
Um, well, just because we always talk about MTSS and just kind of pyramid of and layers of supports and everything like that, or if you're RTI still or RTI under MTSS or however your district or your school is doing it, going with just PBIS brings a lot of different parts to it. Um,
Right.
and they have a lot of embedded videos and things like that that are accessible. And the biggest part about that is the character traits that you teach, right? What do you expect? A lot of
Right.
schools stick to respectful, responsible, safe, or some variation of those things.
Hmm.
And so having those character lessons around there. Now, why is that important? Is that sets that kind of that universal expectation for everybody. And so
Right.
that's not just in the hallway, but that's also how your class accesses the hallway. And so just some different tips and different tricks on that with PBIS. And then some places will have their token systems and you'll get your
Hmm.
tickets. I've had like pop rides. See, we had engineer tickets for one of my schools. There's Oh, there was like a pirate one at one point. I'm not entirely sure what that one was. Um, but either way, you earn some sort of added incentive, right?
Right.
And that can be translated into so many ways and so many um, and used in so many just different circumstances. And where that gets you then is once you have that established kind of universal thing like your school does, then you can start tailoring it down to a specific group or a kiddo from there, and
Hmm.
that can help. And how you do that and is usually accessible in a lot of the videos on there about how to have a quick tip with something or how to use ticket incentives or make a chart, a daily chart for a kiddo
Right.
needs to use that or who needs to have that extra added bonus for that. Um, from there, I always talk about, okay, now that we have some idea about how to handle some general things within the classroom, moving around the school, now you need to know that some behaviors aren't going to be rewarded out. If we have trauma, which is a disconnection, no matter how you talk about or how you define it, what that will do is that's a survival behavior. And so rewarding that out doesn't quite work the same way. That has to be learned and replaced from there. And so replacing those behaviors and can be tricky at times, but it also depends on the kiddo and establishing that trust and safe environment. So any sort of trauma training,
Hmm.
there's the National Traumatic or Traumatic if you're from the Britain, Traumatic Stress Network.
Remodeling.
If you Google that, it's a website and it's a foundation that has a ton of training and ton of literature and different parts on there as well. So the National Traumatic Stress Network, and they have the National Child Traumatic Stress Network, I believe. I might be a little bit off on that, but you can get there
Dramatic. Okay.
um, through the main area as well, and they have just a ton of resources on that and how to use that in schools. So
Uh-huh.
those are two big ones where you can talk about. 90% of the kids that are going to walk through your school are going to have some sort of reaction or do well or at least be supported through those those two ones alone, right? Because then you have anybody who has any sort of lagging skills, you're talking about building up some of those really foundational skills through PBIS. And if you have anybody who has trouble accessing some of those skills from delays in development through trauma or anything like that, then you have some different strategies that you can take away from them. And that's 90%.
Yeah.
Um, and just kind of you hit your nail on the head. Is that every district's going to have their own version of something to to help with some of those more unique or acute situations where you do have somebody who
Right.
has some more externalizing behaviors, and that can look like MANT training is one or CPI, and
Hmm.
a lot of those come with their own caveats to how much
Right.
the district or the building's going to support as far as restraints or as far as any sort of de-escalation training. Most districts I've worked in, and let's see, I've been in, I think I'm at seven at this
Oh,
point in
wow.
like different states. Um, they all have some version of like being able to give everybody some de-escalation skills of
Uh-huh.
some sort. Um, so that that can be accessible sometimes through their professional development, or if you're in like a workshop um, district, we do a whole professional series in my district. I'm in South Omaha in the Papillion area, and we have a really well developed professional development series that you can sign up, and it's a course catalog basically. And you can take some trainings with me if you really wanted to. But through
Awesome.
there, we can deliver a lot of different things, sometimes online, sometimes in person. Um, and then just having some of those work days that be able to take advantage of those.
So can they ask you like for specific training, or do you already have um set courses available?
Well, both. And that's
Okay.
kind of how my district approaches it. So we have some very, like I said, just some very foundational, some very routinized ones. We
Hmm.
have one that's called Pride Skills, and it's kind of taken from this support and resource that we have in our district called TCIT, which is teacher-child interaction training, which is a more specific um, training that's evolved from counseling support and resource and counseling technique that's called PCIT, which is parent-child interaction training.
Mm.
But the pride skills are some more of the basic, like reinforcing skills of, are you offering praise? Can you offer reflections?
Hmm.
Can you enjoy time with a kid? Can you do a behavior description of what they're doing? And those are just different ways that you can interact with a kiddo that offers
Right.
them praise, it offers them your attention in a more positive way. And so it'd be like, hey, Diane, I love how you have your wonderful eyes watching me. And so that would be like a labeled praise. That'd be a way to reinforce that that's the behavior I want. I'm
Right.
going to ignore, Billy Bob Sue over there who's not giving me his eyes because I'm going to reward the behavior that I want to help increase it. And so it's a lot of social learning, a lot of social reinforcement, and things along those lines. And so we have a pride skill that we like to get delivered to as many people as possible. All of our paras get trained in it. Most of our school staff, a lot of support staff as well, just because they interact so much. And
Hmm.
it's applicable to like anybody who interacts with a kid
Right.
or other adults too, right?
Oh,
Like I
yeah.
would probably pay attention a lot more in some meetings if I got a few reflections and a few praises. Like Smith, I love how you brought donuts. Like, yeah, all right.
Nice. Of course. Who doesn't want to hear, that positive feedback?
Absolutely. And so
Yeah.
that's a big focus for it. And as far as TCIT goes, where this was a component of it, there's a lot more in there and more in depth. But the really big hallmark parts of this that we can translate to everybody's interactions, why not train them in that? So
Mhm.
so keeping an eye out for some different parts like that school districts are very creative in how we use people, and sometimes we
Right.
want to make sure that make take advantage of that. Um, but there's a whole bunch of free opportunities out there, and I think you hit it on the head with the YouTube as well.
Yes. Uh-huh.
I sound pretty old when I refer to it as the YouTube. It's like the Facebook thing. But
Okay.
there's been so many different things that have been uploaded and so many different
Yeah.
supports. On my counseling side alone, there's just so many groups and
Oh, right.
so many wonderful people that have a lot of ideas and a lot of just different ways of demonstrating and kind of different ways that they've applied some things. So being able to serve that out is pretty key.
Yeah, I mean, there is definitely a wealth of information out there. Um, but obviously it's taking the time and being able to access specifically what you want. I think one of the skills training we were talking about was through CPI, which is the Crisis Prevention Institute, and they offer the nonviolent crisis intervention, and that's where, like you said, some of the restraints we have used. Um, we get that training, but it also teaches some of those de-escalation skills because using restraints or physical holds is definitely the last resort. And so being able to know, like, how can we help de-escalate this situation and this student without making things worse? You know, do we try and talk to them when they're escalated? Do we try and move them? Do we try and move the class? Are we moving items? Are we, you know, and our team that I work with now, we really know what to do, especially if even another teacher brings in their escalated student. Like we're right away clearing off desks, we're moving chairs around, we're moving some tables around, um, some, maybe scissors were left on the table. Like we're grabbing all of that stuff and moving it. But you're not going to know a lot of these things until you get the experience. But I think being able to have that training of de-escalation and just trying to help in those situations is important. So, what do you offer or what do you suggest as far as de-escalation skills?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more on that. So the de-escalation skills, CPI has a, a wealth of experience in developing it, but they're not anything new.
No,
One of the biggest things that you can offer somebody is the gift of their time and listening.
right.
And so it's listening to hear, not to solve. And that's a big
That's
de-escalation
huge.
skill
Yeah.
right there. Yeah, but I mean that takes practice. It's a skill. People think like listening, like, oh, I hear you. Like, well, but are you really listening? And it takes a lot because can you listen and hear the content? Can you listen and hear the emotion? Can you listen and hear, the intent? And those are all very different things and can be very key to having somebody de-escalate from there.
Hmm.
And then there's getting to know kind of how you're how that person's communicating, but also where are they in that escalation cycle? Are they about to
Right.
lose their stuff and somebody's shoes getting thrown and
Yeah.
or are they building up to that? And so in CPI land, are they rise in crisis, right? Uh,
Hmm.
I always liken it to like a
Height.
story plot. Yeah. I was trying like throw in especially when I'm teaching this. I used to be a trainer for CPI. I would always like throw it in like it's a storyline. It's like a plot. So you have your rising action and you're
Yeah.
getting towards your denouement or like
Hmm.
your climax. Are they there? Because at that
Right.
point you don't want added verbals. You want
No.
just presence.
Yeah.
Um, and a lot
Calm.
of people throw out, yes, they'll throw out that you got to be their frontal lobe. You got to be the calm for their storm.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
hard to do. So that takes some
Mhm.
practice to be able to just sit with somebody and share space
Right.
and offer some validation, but not necessarily solve their problems.
Right.
Sometimes people, when they're starting to get agitated, having two choice options within something within your realm of being able to provide in a timely manner,
Hmm.
right? It's not like, hey, yeah. well, if you just calm down right now, we'll get some fluffy puppy dogs and eat some
Right.
ice cream all day long. Like, hell yeah, I'd calm down
Okay.
for that. Yeah. But yeah, how feasible is that on a day-to-day basis,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I've only been able to round up one dog like that.
One puppy.
So far anyway, right?
Yeah.
So it has to be something that's realistic because kids, even kids who are just having the worst day and just seem like they're irrational or they have flipped their
Right.
lid, if you want to kind of borrow Dan Siegel's method, they know when somebody's not being genuine. And so you
Yeah.
got to bring your genuine self. And
For real.
uh, so the de-escalation can help if they're rising up, sometimes offering choices, offering them a way out. Uh,
Right.
you know, if they're an older kid or an older student, maybe offering them a way to be not in front of their friends so that if they do feel like they have to lose it, they'll still save face. And that can be a big thing
Right.
culturally. If you were talking about somebody who's low SES or somebody who's in a culture that doesn't accept necessarily huge emotional outbursts, that can be a big point of shame or pride that you
Mm-hmm.
have to contain or contend with. So if you can know your kids, that's great. If you're not sure, offer the choice. If
Right.
they're at the point where they lash out or they have that verbal outburst or externalizing behavior or whatever you want to do, that's trying to make the area safe, trying to make help them be safe, trying to keep yourself safe too.
Right.
So all of those things can happen. There's different ways and techniques of it, but really what it is, it comes down to is listen. Don't try to solve the problem yet. They may not
Right.
be there, and that may not be a problem you can solve. If we're talking about one of our kids with trauma and ACEs, that's not a problem
Right.
you're solving,
Yeah.
right? That's a what we're seeing is a symptom of something.
Right.
So we're helping just kind of keep in the moment, be the calm for their storm.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's so many different guides about how to kind of be that calm and how to give that calm. And a lot of it deals with establishing the connection. Maybe you don't have it to start. That doesn't
Mm-hmm.
mean you can't work on it. Like you may not be friends yet, but hey, that friend is just a stranger you haven't met yet, right?
Right.
Or a stranger is just a friend you haven't met yet.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I messed that one up, but
Gotcha.
still. But the point is that if you're in that kid's world to help at that point, why not invest some time in them? And
Yeah,
but that also takes some time and intentionality. So there's so many different parts that can go into de-escalation like
for
that.
sure.
And then there's just some times where you just need something that's going to distract. Like I have a kiddo who
Mm-hmm.
he was building up today and he loves his Kingdom Hearts video game. And so
Uh,
we've talked in the past about like, hey, let's make a new game. What would you write? So he told me he's at Agrabah and he's gonna be instead of Aladdin, it's gonna be him. I was like,
uh,
dude, rock on. What are you gonna do next? And so
right,
we just kind of went down a whole different road. Doesn't mean that we were able to solve what he was upset about. I don't know if that was something I could have at that point,
right.
but he had somebody we could talk about and talk to, and that's a big part. So none of that is any sort of newfangled thing that CPI or MANT or
No,
there was one in Washington that was right response. That's not anything new. It's just a matter of trying to get a feel, trying to get a little experience.
right.
Um, and that's if you do go into any of those trainings, that's one of the biggest parts that they highlight is use those, develop the connection,
Mm-hmm.
use those other supports that are in there or your other trainings like your trauma trainings, your biological like emphasis of how people learn that a lot of teachers are going through right now with brainwise and different things like that. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and just how those effects, use those and just integrate them in as much as you can. At PBIS trainings, your support trainings, your intentional breaks or brain breaks,
Yeah,
you know, take them out, do go noodle.
for sure.
That moose can make anybody smile. I don't care who you are.
It's so true. I love doing those with the kids.
Yeah,
But
they're a lot of
all
fun.
of those are definitely key. And if you have had no training whatsoever with any de-escalation skills, and you have a student who is like about to explode or maybe who's already exploded in your classroom, like that is a scary place to be. And like we still have teachers tell us like I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you do, But it is something you learn over the years. Like you have to be the calm because how am I going to help that student if I'm, getting in and granted, you're going to feel all those emotions, but you can't show them in the midst of it because you have to show them calm. And it's definitely learning and knowing your students, like you were saying. Some students you'll be able to tell, okay, he's getting close. Maybe I need to offer this right now, or he's past it. Like I just need extra support in here. Or, he's way over it. The whole class needs to leave and we need to get somebody else in here. So it's really getting to know your students and what works for them. And that's really trial and error too. Um, but ultimately, like you said, that calm body, calm voice, and just giving them space. As long as they're being safe, just give them the space and let them escalate because, like, they're going to come down eventually. And you need to be there and be that calm and be like, okay, so what do you need? And a lot of our students, like, they're hungry
Yeah.
after that. Some of them, they have, like, I just need to sit down or, go lay down. And just giving them, again, like you said, that time and space. And once they're ready, and we'll even tell them, like, let us know when you're ready to talk, or, are you ready to talk now? No. Okay. We'll come back to that. Or you don't even have time at that point. They're just ready to go back to class. And it's like, okay, let's go back to class.
And
So
that's
I
the thing is
think,
that,
yeah, go
go
ahead.
ahead. Well, when it becomes to the point of a behavior that's not the first time,
Yeah.
and if you miss it, it okay, there's going to be another time to address it. Most
Right.
times, and in most places, it's more rare that we get a behavior that really it's like it's got to be right then and there.
Yeah.
And just having giving students some control and some autonomy back, like treating them like a person
Right.
and being like giving them the choice. There's some times where my wife and I, like, we get in arguments. I'm not ready to talk to you. Like, I love you,
Yeah.
girl, but
Right.
I'm gonna I'm gonna go build my Legos and stew or steam, and once
Yeah.
I get that out, then I'm ready.
Right.
Little kids are the same way. Kids are people. They're mini
Right.
humans, and they have their times when they're ready and they're not ready. Giving them that autonomy is just very validating. Um, the other part that I always like to, just my counselor in mental health hat, therapist hat, there's different organizations that will offer things like youth mental health first aid, and that just gives you just more information, build on that psychology or that just developmental level of how kids go through the mental development and their maturity as far as the personality and the different things and that they encounter. Or sometimes it has a little bit of a specialty on like how crisis affects people,
Yeah.
and so that gives you just a little bit more information about maybe I'm going to approach it this way and phrase it this way rather um, than directly. I'm going to kind of be a little bit indirect, kind of like what we said is it doesn't have to be a day like a direct challenge of we got to process this, we got to hug this
Right.
out, and then we're going to be done with it. Like
Yeah.
I'm approaching it in that soft way or an indirect way is one of the better ways to do that. And that just gives you a little bit more confidence, a little bit more background knowledge to help with when you're
Right.
with your kids and your students. And a lot of times there's supports in the community, like your YMCA's,
All right.
mental health clinics and outreach, public health.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes they offer some of those for free or very low cost. So it's just a
Yeah.
matter of just kind of seeking some of those out. And if you're lucky enough to have social workers in your
Yeah.
buildings, that can be a thing that they find out and they hook you up with.
Right.
At least they have some of the resources where you can seek that out.
Yeah, for sure. A couple websites I was looking at and also put on in the show notes and stuff like safeandcivilschools.com, responsiveclassroom.org. Again, there's a lot of resources available. but just knowing where to go too, is super important. So some of the student behavior, like we were already discussing, there's underlying issues. And like you said, a lot of those we're not going to be able to solve, but how do we help get them through the day? How do we help them be as successful as possible? And again, that's not a one and done. It's a constant. And like you said, they're going to have that behavior again, either tomorrow or next week or in 5 minutes. You just don't know. And so being able and knowing that even though you reacted and you were able to be there for them, they're going to need you again. It's not a one and done. And I think we have to remember that too. And these kids are hurting and sometimes they're really suffering, and we just have to be that empathetic ear and be there. And so again, it comes back to that connection, that relationship, knowing your students and what's going to work for them. Um, so another good skill is, how can we be proactive? What kind of training can we use that will help us to be, or help teachers and staff to be proactive in the student behavior?
That and there's a lot of good ones. So the part of that PB, kind of what we talked about with PBIS, is
Yeah.
just laying the foundation for that. Responsive classrooms is a really, I love responsive classrooms, and
Yeah.
capturing kids' hearts were two very big ones when in my last district that I was in it, up north of Yale in Monument. And so what they do is they like to create culture. And I think I've spoke on this before, is creating the culture in the classroom of acceptance and opening the door and things like that. So what that does is managing behaviors. It opens the door to allow for people to express frustration and emotions like that freely without the stigma, hopefully,
Hmm.
or being able to ask questions and feel like you could fail, but you're failing in order to succeed. Like you're going to try three different ways so that you can learn how to do it the fourth time. And
Hmm.
so the classroom culture, and that's what a big part of responsive classrooms is,
Yes.
um, can help kind of lay that foundation that we're going to talk it out, we're going to have bad days, we're
Mhm.
going to work collaboratively, and we're one big community that helps each other. And that's such a key part right there. So those are right on. And they
Mhm.
help you kind of take that culture and then work within it. So the
Yeah.
responsive classrooms has a lot of closing circles and different things like that about how you can approach things like, let's say we had a blow up and somebody tipped their desk and just it was a bad day.
Right.
Okay, come together in that closing circle. Like we had a lot of frustration. That was unexpected. What
Yeah.
can we do? And then
Yeah.
it's not just you trying to solve the problem, it's your students talking about
Together. Yeah.
what can help in the future. And that's where learning is. That's experiential learning, right? That's being able to solve their own problems. And kids come up with some amazing,
Yeah.
truly amazing things. Like you know what? I could have done this, or I probably shouldn't have said that to Billy Bob Sue, or I know Mrs. B doesn't like it, so I'll do this instead,
Right.
right? And so that's where you can have like a lot of culture of collaboration and problem solving from there, just from setting up your general PBIS, your responsive classrooms, your circles, your capturing kids' hearts with your opening activities and things like that. That establishes those things and allows that community to be able to function and to be able to be flexible and adapt to new challenges. And so
Right.
that's a huge part right there. Getting any more training on behavior, on trauma, on mental health, those are some very big things that are going to happen, that are going to impact your teaching and your classroom within those communities. So
Right.
what those can do is those can help inform your ability to start seeing some predictive factors. If you see some slow triggers or antecedent behaviors or
Right.
setting events, depending on however you want to frame them and what your kind of philosophy is how or what am I seeing in the build up to frustration or the build up to the behavior that happens. And the
Right.
sooner that we can start identifying those, then we can start working with kiddos and with families and just support people to solve those as we go. Like I'm seeing this, I think we should, what if we tried this? Or I don't know.
Right.
Like, what do you guys? And that's where your school community can come together and help
Hmm.
solve that problem too, between family, um, maybe their parents, this isn't their first rodeo. You know,
Right.
like we said, that this behavior didn't happen in a day. Maybe they do, maybe they handle it a certain way outside of school, and it's just
Right.
learning the catchphrases that just kind of trigger that, like, hey, we go for a reset break, or, this is just a speed bump. Let's not let a speed bump slow us down.
Right.
And different phrases like that can have different power depending on like the family culture they come from or how they've
Right.
been coached in the past or, their therapy, things like that. And so those are just some different ways that they can help inform how to recognize them before they happen. Sometimes we're just going to have bad days, and bad days look different for all of us. And
Right.
so using that training to start identifying, but then solving them for next time is a key part of that.
Yeah, those are great for sure. Getting that school climate, your classroom. How do you want kids to feel when they're in your room? And those are also like that class charter,
Yep.
that people have done at the beginning of the year. And I've seen a lot of teachers go back over that, coming back from, winter break and reminding them like this is how we want to feel in here. This is how we treat each other and getting that foundation really is super important. And again, like you said, that parent communication. Hopefully, I know some parents are not wanting to communicate. They just want you to fix it and send their kid home. Other times you have parents who are like, oh yeah, and this is what we do. And sometimes obviously we can't, just sit them in the room on their iPad and let them play Minecraft all day. But what can we come together and help, while they're at school? So those, I mean, that's a huge factor to be able to get for students, but definitely keeping that communication open always is really key and really makes a difference as well. Um, so you touched a little bit on mental health. As we kind of wrap up here, is there something else that you want to add regarding the mental health? Because of course, that does play a factor in student behavior. And what are some things that we can do in the classroom for that mental health piece?
Um, One of the biggest part is just honoring different things and kind of talking about it. Like if you're having a rough day, tell that to the kids. If
Yeah.
you're I always say, it's a fine line of like if you're sitting there going, I am so burnt out for forever, and just say like, hey, I'm having a bad day, guys.
Yeah.
Sorry. Like I might be grouchy. I put on my grouch pants instead, right? You
Yeah.
can tell I work with elementary kids. Like I got the grouch pants on.
Exactly.
Um, but just honoring your own and just saying
Yeah.
like, you know what, that really frustrates me. It's okay to tell kids that,
Yeah.
right? We're not blaming, we're saying we're labeling how we are feeling, right?
Right.
We start trying to assign emotions to other kids as a cause, that's where it gets not on the great end, right?
Right.
But our own mental health comes to comes to be a factor, right? We
Right.
know behavior influences behavior.
Yeah.
So to be able to model appropriate displays of emotion is so key, especially with our young ones. But even, our 12-year-olds, our middle schoolers, our high schoolers, they're
Hmm.
struggling with things that they don't quite even know how to articulate.
Right.
Sometimes they don't have the skills to be able to articulate why I'm feeling the way I am. So being able to voice to that for yourself, as well as just talking about that and giving options as far as, if you need to talk to somebody, I'm here. And if I'm not the best one, let's get you to the right person.
Right. Hmm.
And those are just different ways you do that. I always tell um, staff whenever I'm training people, it's like, you know, sometimes I'm not the best counselor. Sometimes you guys are counselors because that's what teachers do. They care and they wear so many hats and paras too. I mean, just the amount of things that you guys handle is just extraordinary. But it doesn't mean that you need a professional to listen. So being
Right.
able to listen and validate is so key. And that helps with so many different things with mental health. Um, some ways to kind of conceptualize mental health and psychology is too much connection or too little, and the effects from there.
Mm,
So being able to kind of start listening, is this too much connection? There's just too much involvement, too much enmeshment, too
hmm.
much
Right.
presence, or they're not enough, or they're trying to get out of connection. And so there's just different ways to listen and
Mm,
see where people are at. And that's a big part of mental health is just listening to accept people where they're at and where they're coming from. And my personal bend is to the unconditional positive regard. Try to practice that as much as possible. People are being people and they're trying to do their best, and people want to do their best if they can.
right.
So being able to listen and accept them where they are and help them to there is where I'm at, and that's where a lot of my colleagues are and come from. And that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I went to one training, and this reminds me, they were saying, none of your students wake up, in the morning and are like, okay, how can I destroy my teacher's room today? How can I make her mad? How can I, like students aren't thinking that. They just get that overwhelm of emotion, and how can we be there to support them? And sometimes it doesn't have to be like, all right, now I got to sit down with these students for a half an hour and listen to each one's, life story and but no, it's just like you said, and the way you greet your students in the morning, it's the way you talk to them, it's the way you listen to them. All of that builds that connection and builds that proactive like into their mental health, right? So you're just, again, kind of laying that foundation or maybe building on a foundation if you have kids coming from, a solid family, but they still kind of struggle. Obviously, there's no perfect home, there's no perfect parents. Each kid is going to have their moments here and there, and some, of course, are going to be more than others. But being able to know your students and help them through. And like you said, if it's not you, it could be somebody else. Like one of your mentors said, I remember her sitting down with some of our students, like, who do you feel safe with in the building? So it doesn't have to be the school counselor. It doesn't have to be the para you're working with or the teacher. It could be, I don't know, maybe the lunch lady. I don't know, but being able to get that connection if that's where they feel safest to be able to talk to them. So these are great strategies, great ideas for different trainings for staff. And hopefully you guys can check out some of these websites and even Andrew's site, where you can possibly get training from Andrew. That would be really cool. I'm gonna have to check that out for sure. And a quote I saw, this was actually from a Delaware news station, and they reported 3 out of 5 educators are more likely to retire early or leave due to challenging student behavior. And they're saying, there is a crisis in public education. And this was September of last year, of 2024. So this isn't, you know, years ago. This is recent. And we have to help equip, the educators who are down in it. And I mean, we all know, like, we can go on about school policy and admin and all these other things, which we can't really control, but you can control your classroom, hopefully, as much as possible, and making it a safe place for your students.
Absolutely.
Is there anything else you want to add, Andrew, before we go?
Nope. Just keep being the light to somebody's darkness and the calm for their storm.
I love it. Okay, I may have to quote you on that one. Thanks so much again, guys, for listening. And please share this episode wherever you are to other educators. And thanks again, Andrew, for being here and sharing your wisdom and expertise. All right,
Pleasure.
guys, we will see you next week.